Good evening, and welcome to the August 11th meeting of the City of Kalamazoo Board of Appeals, a voluntary advisory board appointed by the City Commission. Mr. Eldridge, could we get a attendance roll call?
Yes. Turpinning. Here. Lager.
Here.
Carroll.
Yes, here.
Harrington.
Present here.
Purdue.
Here.
And we've heard from Vanden Hamburg and Ms. Doan that they are not going to be present tonight.
Yes, thank you. Public comments will be accepted during the times as indicated on tonight's meeting agenda. Community members that wish to provide public comments over the phone can call 888-382-9596. That's 888-382-9556. They can do so during the public comment period. They will enter a queue and will be prompted to offer their comments in turn. Callers will be commenting to the board live and will no longer be able to leave a recorded message. Are there any announcements or changes to the original agenda?
I have one announcement to make tonight, and just to clarify, so the notice that was mailed out for 4114 Stadium Drive, the original notice that was mailed out indicated the applicant name of Grassy Key Land Company, which is the owner of the property, but the actual applicant is L.E. Battle Creek, Inc. So I just want to make that change for the record when we talk about moving that motion forward. It is correct on the agenda and in the staff report.
Thank you.
So, Pete, I'm sorry. Say it again.
Correct, Battle Creek, Inc. L.E. Battle Creek, Inc.
Thank you. Yes, that is correct.
Now we'll move to an acceptance of last month's minutes. Are there any changes proposed to the minutes? Hearing none.
I didn't know if I needed to have it changed to have my title as alternate on there, or without it being designated that I'm the alternate on the meeting minutes.
Well, that's a good point. We should include that on there, the alternate title. I thought we had put that in parentheses, maybe not, clearly not. Let's make note of that change, and we'll add that.
Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
I would like to make a motion that alternate is added next to my name, Jared Purdue.
Would you also like to make a motion to approve it with that change?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a motion to a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, the same. Last month's minutes have been approved. I will now explain our procedure for tonight's public hearing. For each request, the secretary will read the application into the public record. The applicant and representatives will have 10 minutes to provide their comments. Following that, the public is invited to step up to the podium, starting with those in favor of the application. Clearly state your name and address and present your comments within the 3 minutes allowed. Following, all comments from those who wish to speak in opposition will be invited. My apologies. I read that wrong. You'll have 10 minutes. New paragraph. Following, all comments from all those who wish to speak. We will invite those who wish to speak in opposition or otherwise comment to do the same. My apologies. Next, any call and comments will be aired for the board and audience. After this, we will close the public hearing on the request. Once the public hearing is closed, the board will then conduct what is called a finding of fact, where the board states what they feel are the facts of the request. The board must approve the finding of fact. Therefore, the first vote you hear is not a ruling on the request, but the finding of fact. Then the board will discuss the request in order to determine a ruling. The board reserves the privilege to ask questions of persons who have already spoken, even though the public comment portion has been closed. Once discussion is ended, the board will move on to a roll call vote. A full board consists of 6 members, with 4 votes required to grant a non-use variance or a use variance. Would you like to read the first application into the record, please?
Yes. An application for a variance from provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by ACW 1N LLC for 235 Cooley Street and 455 Eleanor Street in the Downtown 2 District, D2. The applicant is requesting a use variance from Chapter 50-4.4 C10B to allow a commercial parking lot on a corner lot in the D2 district, where a standalone parking lot is not permitted on corner lots in the D2 district. Please note that this request will not change the zoning classification of the property. This is a request for variance only regarding the item described above.
Thank you. Will the applicant step up to the podium, sign in, and provide your name to us slowly, and explain the request in the time allotted to you, which is 10 minutes?
My name is Andy Wenzel with Plaza Corp. We're the managing entity of the applicant, ACW. We have 4 parcels there. We're pretty creative. They're ACW LLC 1, 2, and 3. So just to identify those parcels. Thank you for having us on the agenda this evening, and we're excited about moving forward to the next phase of planning and design of some new residential units here in downtown Kalamazoo. This is, of course, situated in the ACW quadrant, the northwest quadrant of the urban core, where it's been a long time coming to have some good activity. Most recent, we currently have the county courthouse under construction in that quadrant. One of our projects was the Hilton Garden Inn in that quadrant, and among some other ones adjacent, the Arcadia Commons, or the Arcadia, what used to be the National City or PNC headquarters building right down there. We own that. We're working on a redevelopment to bring more residential into this area. So this matter on your agenda this evening is to seek a variance for surface parking, which would provide for moving forward with phase 1 of our project. The project is in 2 phases, 2 buildings. The first phase would be accommodated by your variance tonight, and this would allow us to move forward. It would allow for parking and flexibility, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. So again, Plaza Corp, I just kind of like to remind people some of the projects we've worked on over in the entertainment district, the Depot building, where Beer Exchange is, where Tower Pinkster is, all those properties. We worked on those before it was popular, or really kind of some of them before it was even safe to walk in that area. So there was a time when you wouldn't walk past the Radisson downtown, and we kind of ventured into that area 30 plus years ago. So we're very invested in Kalamazoo. We're an owner developer. We always look at long-term hold. That's just our perspective on how we look at projects. So it's a little bit different than some developers may look at things. but we always look at a long-term hold on a project that we enter into. Here's some of the projects that that I've mentioned, including the Exchange Building, just kitty corner here. So the project over at ACW, again, this shows the two phases of two buildings on the south side of the creek, if you've looked at your map, and we'll get into a block map here. But 12 stories each, 238 residential units in each building. The first phase would be approximately 238 residential units and about 6,900 square feet of commercial space, likely restaurant space and/or other retail commercial space on the first floor. The buildings do include parking, so about a half level of parking on the first floor, and then second floor parking within the buildings, but that is only about 46 spaces within each building. So again, I mentioned flexibility. So the north side of the creek is part of the area that's identified as being included in the arena development, the entertainment building, the arena building that may or may not move forward. But we've offered that our properties on the north side of the creek could be part of that and could be part of that development. It's likely that those would be needed for that development in that area. So we've worked with city staff, city planning, we've been working on this for quite some time, to work on a phased development where we can continue forward, we can continue to move forward and get our development for our project in line and ready to move on. And then we're flexible. If the arena goes forward, then this parcel that we're talking about today would be part of the arena, and then alternate parking would be figured out in our other, either as part of our phase 2 on that site or on another adjacent site to accommodate parking. So one way or another, we're going to figure out the parking puzzle. But for phase 1, tonight's action would allow us to move forward and would allow adequate parking in close proximity to a residential building. And so it's it's imperative. We would need approval this evening to be able to move forward. Here on the screen, we show the two buildings, phase 1, building A. They do show it of different heights. They will be the same height. We didn't change the concept drawing yet, but they're both 12 stories in total, including the parking, two floors of parking. And we identify, again, the parking, the east lot, which is on the other side of the creek from the phase 1 building. That has 63 spaces. That's already a surface parking lot. The west lot currently contains a building that's functionally obsolete. It's part of the old Gilmore car auto body and maintenance facility there. We have a hard time keeping it under control, I guess. People keep trying to get into it. It's very tough. So sooner or later, it needs to come down, and it would come down as part of future development for this project. Here shows an aerial view of the block. Again, the orange shown here is the parking, and in the upper left-hand corner is the parcel that we're discussing today for the variance. The upper right-hand side, or the northeast side, that is surface parking today. The green is phase 1 building. The yellow is phase 2 building. And again, phase 1 is what's associated with the surface parking that's needed. To the north of that is Kalamazoo Avenue, and of course the current development that's happening with the county courthouse. And here's our site plan, which shows again on the bottom part of the plan here are the two building sites, and on the upper part of the plan here are the two parking lot layouts. Again, we've worked with the city to address landscaping, storm. We'll meet the requirements for landscaping and storm. Staff will probably give highlights of the request, but, whoops.
Excuse me, that's not me, that happens on occasion. You have 2 minutes left.
Thank you. But we have agreed to a 5-year, there's been a requirement for a 5-year timeframe on this variance. So we would obtain the variance, move forward with site plan approval, hopefully then move right into concept drawings and final drawings and construction next year. So it's a pretty aggressive timeline, but we're ready to. And I guess with that, let me see if I can go back. With that, I would address any questions that you might have. We're happy to be on the agenda this evening, happy to move this project forward, and I'd be glad to address any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions from the board?
I have a question. So the use variance is to accommodate the short-term development of the project as you consider putting a potential event space on the property? Is
So-
that, what are you specifically asking for the use variance for?
So the use variance is for surface parking on a corner. So the use variance is limited just to that corner parcel that we need to turn into surface parking for this phase 1 of the development. The reason for the flexibility, part of the reason, is because where that parking will be located
Could be potentially
could be
developed in the
potentially
future?
the event center.
Got it.
So-
And hold on, Pete, so they're not allowed to do that surface parking in that, where it's zoned right there?
Correct.
Okay,
correct.
okay,
Under the, there's the D1, which is the most intensive area of the downtown, and D2 is the next ring out from that, and really, the long-term vision and the description of that zone really looks towards more dense development on those sites, essentially everything but, just surface parking lot.
okay, so the 5 years, what is that? Can you speak to that a little bit more from the staff perspective, or is that your jam? Whose job is that to explain that to me?
Well, the city is,
Okay,
the applicant actually would like a longer time frame, but the city has decided that 5 years is sufficient, to see if the event center
Happens.
moves forward.
Okay.
And then allow for infill development on this corner, meaning putting a building on the parking lot.
so where did 5 years come from, though? Like, where did that come from?
That came from.
The city? Y'all said that?
Yeah, that came from the
Okay.
city planner. And, that was, that's what we've talked to the applicant about. They understand where the city's at on that. And, without that 5-year provision in here, there is no staff support for this variance.
Without the 5 years, there's no staff support for this variance? Without the 5 years? So if they don't build the event center, then staff will not support this project?
Within that 5-year span of time, either the event center will move forward, and it'll be known whether the event center will need that parcel that we're talking about tonight, this corner lot.
Sure.
And if they don't, then Plaza Corp can proceed with building the proposed building that they have planned for this corner. So they just didn't want to proceed with design planning for a building on this corner, only to have the event center move forward and them identify them, meaning the event center group, identifying that they want this corner as part of the event center property. That makes sense. So that 5-year time horizon allows for either A, the event center to move forward and identify they're going to use this corner lot, or B, it allows for Plaza Corp to submit plans to build a building on this corner, which then makes it legal and conforming with the ordinance.
I have to process that. That was a lot. Thank you. That was a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. I
Thank
mean-
you, but I appreciate how thorough that was. Thank you.
So you talked a little bit on parking in the future.
Yes.
How confident are you that you're going to find enough parking for this development in future years?
Sure, good question. So that's in process now. There are options that are being looked at with us and with others because the event center needs parking, we need parking, the county needs more parking. So there's really a bigger group that's looking at the whole parking picture, and that goes to your question. You're right, 5 years is a short period of time. We agree. But we need to figure this out. And basically, we've kind of pushed the envelope, or kind of prodded, because we had to move. We need to move forward. We're sitting on land that's undeveloped, that is ready to be developed. And so this, I think, kind of helped move things along to figure out, is there going to be an event center, or is there not going to be an event center? And if there is, then let's figure out the parking piece for all the parties involved, which is, again, in process. So there actually is some logic here. The plan that we put in front of you this evening is we're trying to move forward with a responsible way, taking into consideration stormwater, landscaping, all of those good things, but also trying to waste as little money as possible on improvements that are going to be torn up potentially within that 5-year period.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Are there other questions? I have one question. If I remember correctly, in the application packet, there was mention of a bond being put in place in case. I didn't know that there would be potentially a building on the parking lot, which we're talking about. So if in 5 years there's no building and it can't stay parking, there's a bond in.
Right, there's a requirement, and we're in agreement, to place a bond upon building permit approval to move forward with construction of the parking on that site, that we would place a bond to replace it to either its natural state or move forward with approval of a building to be built there, which could be future development, phase 3.
Mr. Eldridge, does the city need us to address the amount of that bond in this situation, or that's between you guys?
No, that is something that we will work out. And then, and in the, on the last page of the staff report, under the recommendation, those two conditions are really what we want the board to articulate when making the motion tonight. But yeah, the bond part would be handled by staff and the applicant.
So I wrote here that if you do not move forward with the proposed event center, then you will make that have like other accommodations and amenities for public use, or it will, you said you will return it back to its original state. It will not remain a parking lot if after 5 years of.
Correct.
Okay.
And first of all, I need to make a slight correction.
Sure.
We're not doing the event center. We support it.
Got
We
it.
think it's a great thing for the urban core and for adjacent and for economic development in the downtown, but that's not our project.
Sure.
It's a community project as far as we know.
I understand.
But yes, it would be returned. There would not. I guess the simplest way to look at it is, it would not be surface parking.
Okay, so you
Eliminate
just need
surface parking from there.
park right now while you're trying to develop, you have a two-phase project and you just need some extra space to park right now.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, those in favor are invited to speak at the podium. Now those opposed are invited to speak at the podium. Might we have any phone call-ins?
No call-ins.
Thank you. Mr. Eldridge, would you have any staff comments?
I do have a few staff comments, and I'll try not to reiterate too much of what Mr. Wenzel already touched on, but just to clarify, so again, in the D2 district, corner lots cannot be standalone parking lots. The D2 district is designed to be a more intensively developed zone district with mixed-use buildings built up to the property line, multi-story buildings, if it's residential, high-density residential, but that's why, it's not permitted by right to have a standalone parking lot in the D2 zone. And so this request is a use variance to authorize a temporary parking lot for this, this 5-year period. And what's being proposed is a surface parking lot with water detention, landscaping, all the normal city ordinance requirements. So none of those none of that is changing per se. It will be built like any other commercial parking lot. In addition to, the 5-year sunset provision, that also mitigates the adverse impact on adjacent lands, because this is only for 5 years, so it's not like the other D2 zoned properties around it are going to be developed more intensely, and this corner is going to remain a surface parking lot, for years to come. So I hope that's, understood why the city planning staff is, very adamant about the conditions of placed on this for 5 years. And just speaking to the conditions, it is, a 5-year sunset provision from the date of the board's approval, and the required removal of the parking lot improvements would be necessary at the end of that 5-year period. So we just, in the recommendation is broken down into 1 and recommendation 2. And, with that being said, I understand the applicant's difficulty. I mean, we talk about special circumstances and practical difficulties, and obviously, their long-range plan is to have a building on each quadrant of the, the map identified on the screen right now. But those 2 northern lots that are shown in the orange, they have to limit their planning right now while this event center process continues to go through the planning and concept stage. So they would like to now focus on the southern 2 parcels, but they want to provide sufficient parking during this initial phase of development. So, so we're understandable about the unique circumstance involved here, and, felt that with that condition, staff can support it, and, that would, it would allow them to do what they want to do in the short run. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the board have any additional questions before we establish the facts? Very well. Is there a motion for the finding of fact?
I move that the finding of facts shall include all information in the notice of public hearing dated July 27th, 2022, in the agenda packet staff provided for this request at 235 Cooley Street and 455 Eleanor Street. 15 notices of public hearing were sent and 0 responses were received. A public hearing was held before the board. Public comments were accepted, as were additional documents and voice messages as follows. There were none. In addition to all the things that I've just mentioned, the finding of facts will also include the following. The facts presented that the literal interpretation and enforcement of the terms and provisions of this ordinance would deprive the applicant, for all practical purposes, from using the property for permitted use as a standalone parking lot, which is a right commonly enjoyed by other lands in the same zone districts, are that Plaza Corp advisors have been working on the development of the Arcadia Commons West for a number of years. The area encompassing this project include Eleanor Street, Park Street, Water Street, and West Nudge Avenue. They are requesting a use variance for proposed parking lot, which is a part of a larger development. The facts presented, there are unnecessary hardships based on special circumstances or conditions that are peculiar to the land or structure for which the use variance is sought, that is not applicable to other land or structure than in the same zone district, are that the hardships in the special circumstances are to accommodate the phase one of a phase two project to allow for parking and flexibility for outdoor amenities to expand the options for potential developments, including the possibility of an event space, which may not happen. The facts presented regarding the cause of the special circumstances are that the developer is requesting the use variance with a 5-year sunset provision, as it is the minimum action that can be leveraged to allow for the developer short-term activity on this property. The facts presented regarding whether the action requested is the minimum action which will make it possible to use the lot or structure in a manner that does not negatively impact the public and meets the spirit of the ordinance are that D2 does not allow for the surface area parking on a corner lot, and the zoning requires for a more intensive development, and the city has made an accommodation for a temporary parking lot for up to 5 years while their current phase-in for the project is developed and a decision about the use that is more compliant is considered. The facts presented regarding whether the granting of the variance will adversely affect adjacent land in the material way are that there will be no adverse impact to the adjacent land, and the facts presented regarding whether the granting of the variance will be generally consistent with the purposes and intent of this ordinance are that this will provide economic vitality to our downtown area. That's it. Good?
Very well,
All right.
very well. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, the same. The finding of fact motion passes. Will there be a motion regarding the pending application?
Yes. I move for the granting of a use variance from Chapter 50-4.4C10B to allow a commercial parking lot on a corner lot in the D2 district where a standalone parking lot is not permitted on the corners in the D2 district, with the conditions that a 5-year sunset provision will be in place from the date of this board's approval, and that the parking lot will be removed at the end of that 5-year period. Does that meet the city's agreed upon recommendation?
Yes, it does.
I'd like something in there about the bond. Are you willing to add that to your motion, or?
No.
Very well. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Eldridge, can I have a roll call vote?
Turpinning,
Yes.
Lager,
Yes.
Carroll,
No.
Harrington,
Yes.
Purdue.
Yes.
The application has been granted approval. Thank you. All right. Oh,
Sorry, what?
yeah, it's in the books. Did you want to discuss it?
No, I want to know why you said no.
I wanted the bond in there, and that's it, so. Moving on. It's no big deal.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you just want to unplug that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Could you reset the clock to 10 minutes? I hate people seeing me look at my phone. Would you like to read the second application in?
Yep.
Thank you.
An application for a variance from provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by L.E. Battle Creek, Inc. for 4114 Stadium Drive in the Commercial Community District. The applicant is requesting a dimensional variance from Chapter 50-4.4E1B of 7 feet to allow a marijuana retailer to locate 943 feet from another nearby marijuana retailer after the required separation distance was established at 950 feet. Please note that the reduction of this separation distance to 950 feet was the result of the application of the Natural Features Protection Ordinance to the marijuana retailer developed south of Stadium Drive. Please also note that this request will not change the zoning classification of the property. This is a request for variance only regarding the item described above.
Thank you. Will the applicant step up to the podium, sign in, and provide your name slowly for us, and explain the request in the 10 minutes provided? Thank you.
Good evening. Darren Malik, M-A-L-E-K, here on behalf of the applicant, an attorney in town over at Veritas Law Group in the Kalamazoo building. First, thanks everyone for your time this beautiful summer evening. Maybe we'd all rather be doing yoga in the park, but I appreciate your time and attention. Briefly, this is about a variance request relating to 4114 and 4120 Stadium Drive. The applicant, a representative of the applicant, Mr. Jevin Weinberg, is here this evening, and he's going to speak to some of the bona fides of the applicant, just for your information. Also here today is the property owner representative, who James, I'm sorry, sir? Brobin? James Brobin, and he may speak as well in support. Brief history, this location has previously been used as a marijuana retailer, a licensed marijuana retailer in the city. It was actually the first of the two that are implicated. Initially, this location was in the back of the building, at the north end of the building. When another retailer came in the area on the south side of Stadium Drive, they wished to locate within approximately 950 feet linearly to the south. They sought and were granted, I think, the permission to do that. And just again, by way of history, the reason that the original marijuana retailer was located in the back of that building as opposed to the space that's now proposed, which is the front and back, co-joined space, is that there was an existing occupant of that front space. So we're here in part because at the time they didn't occupy the front space and didn't allow for the additional 7 feet that would have been required back then. So now that space is vacant, and the applicant seeks to occupy the entire space, front and back, and essentially co-join the space. For whatever it's worth, I think it's helpful to note that because It is not a separate building. The old location was not in a separate building. It was an interior demised wall that separated the front unit to the back unit and put it with, and so it was actually further than the 950 feet previously allowed for. It's also, I think, helpful to note that although the physical south end of that building requires this variance, the actual product, sale of product won't occur, and the product itself won't be stored within that 6 feet. It's actually going to be further within the building. So in other words, you're not going to have the product sitting in the front window or anything like that. So from technically one could argue that it's not even within it, but I think it, for purposes of this today, we're going to call it the outside of the building. Again, it's a de minimis request. There's no expansion of the building that's being requested. We're not talking about moving the building further south and intruding further into the encroaching further. If this is improved, the landlord has agreed to make some significant improvements to that building. It's a good building, great location at this point as it stands, but the front fascia of the building would change. Overall, several improvements, and parking lot would be improved as well. I'd also mention that to the extent that there is a concern sort of implied by the distance requirement, the general distance requirement regarding safety or health or other issues, this property had, because it's been used as a retailer already, there have been no issues to our knowledge after some reasonable investigation that arose before. And it's certainly our expectation, and again, as Mr. Weinberg will speak to, in terms of the applicant's history, we expect that would continue and only actually get better. There is support, I believe, from KVCC that is in the record, that is before you. And I would just mention that if this doesn't proceed, that, obviously we can't tell what the future is, but the immediate future would be that building elevation wouldn't change, or I'm sorry, the building fascia improvements wouldn't change, the parking area wouldn't change, and the property owner would be left with 2 vacant spaces. And I guess I'll let my client speak to its own bona fides.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for the time. Appreciate your service to the community through the Zoning Board of Appeals. My name is Jevin Weinberg. I'm co-owner of the business that we're talking about that we would like to put in there. I just wanted to express my gratitude for KVCC, first of all, for even considering working with us and collaborating with us over these last few years on the information that you got there. I am born and raised in Kalamazoo, graduated of Loyola Norris High School. Very honored to even be a business owner in this community. We have 5 operating licenses right now. 4 of them are in the county of Kalamazoo. One of them is in the city of Kalamazoo. It's a processing license on Kilgore. We have a track record of 100% perfect compliance with the state of Michigan and local municipalities that we work with. We've always had an open door policy with everyone. We're always trying to do the right thing and be good corporate citizens in this community. I did want to just focus a little bit on other benefits we offer our employees besides a $15 an hour minimum starting wage, is full health, dental, and vision benefits after 60 days, and then tuition reimbursement as well for cannabis education courses. Full tuition reimbursement on any course they take there. So just a few other benefits that our company offers. This is basically a building that's ready to go, as Darren stated. It's vacant in the front. It's very easily to remodel the front of that building and make it open retailer. It'll create 20 jobs right off the bat. And both of our stores in Portage currently employ about 35 people. And with the volume I expect us to do there, I think we'll be able to probably come closer to that number after about a year of operation, I would say. The building owner has been fantastic to work with, James. He's already done new parking lot remodels. He's got bids in for new signage, new facade on that building on Stadium Drive, which is really going to make it pop on that stadium corridor that's got so much so many great and remodeled buildings now. So appreciate your time, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. There's a couple minutes left on here, so thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions from the board?
Is the expansion to accommodate the relationship that you're developing with KVCC to accommodate their academic programming?
Not this particular expansion, no. We are in conversations with them about a few other things. We do hire some of the people that they have graduating their courses. This expansion is just basically a common sense business expansion. As Darren stated, the business was operating in the back of the store facing away from Stadium Drive, which makes no sense when you have all that great traffic out there. And it was mostly because the Guitar Center wasn't moved out of the front of the building. It just so happened that Guitar Center did move out of the front of the building, and that coincided with the retailer that was in there also wanting to get out of the retail marijuana business and focus on something else, so it was for sale. And anybody looking at that space, there's no firewall or anything in between those two spaces. They naturally flow into each other. The back of the building is already built out really well, secured and very secured cameras and everything, so that's going to really make our job easier in opening the store if we were to be granted this variance. But no, this will help our initiative with KVCC for sure, because we'll be able to hire more people and provide them with opportunities in this industry that we love watching them grow from and grow in this.
Well, that's a cool relationship. So Pete, this issue is about the fact that it's so close in proximity to another marijuana retailer.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, that expanding into the front tenant space in the building brings the licensed space that much closer to the facility that's on the south side of Stadium Drive.
Okay.
So that's, so as was mentioned, there was a marijuana retailer there prior that operated only out of the rear building tenant space. And so now what's proposed is they're looking to lease the rear space as well as the tenant space directly in front of it, which
Sure.
extends.
Thank you. Okay.
Are there other questions? Thank you. Those in favor of the application are now invited to speak at the podium.
I can't hear him. I can't hear you that
hold it?
well.
Can you hold a second?
Sure. Are you able to reprogram it? 3 minutes.
I can watch it. I'll keep you on track.
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is James Broben. I'm the owner of Stadium Drive. Obviously, I fully support this, but I also wanted to give a little clarity on the history of the building. I decided to purchase that building after winning a lottery for that first set of new retailers in Kalamazoo. I was also the operator. I'm the owner of Compassionate Care by Design. I've had 2 stores in Kalamazoo. I also sold my other dispensary in Waterville to Lake Effect because they're such a great operator. We're trying to do the right thing here, and frankly, I bought the property with the understanding that we would be moving into the front of the space, and originally it was a 1,000-foot separation, I believe, and then there was a 50-foot variance put in by the other operator. And then when the license lapsed for a few weeks, that's when we apparently lost our variance. And it was very shocking, honestly, to me, because we had bought the property for the purposes of putting a dispensary in the front of the building. Unfortunately, we got into a little bit of trouble with the front tenant, and it just wasn't able to materialize in the time we needed to. But the property was purchased for the purposes of having a dispensary in the front of that building. So I just want to say how much I support it, but also we have great operators, and I think the history of the building supports our claim here. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Any others that would like to speak in favor? Seeing none, now those opposed are invited to speak at the podium. Might we have any call-in comments?
No call-ins.
Thank you. Mr. Eldridge, do you have comments?
I do. First of all, just to clarify what winning the lottery was, so back when we've adopted the marijuana ordinance, there was a lot of applications received by the city in a very short period of time. And so we actually did essentially hold a lottery where the city clerk had a rotating basket, or yes, some sort of basket full of, it was like bingo, yes, and was basically pulling balls out and reading numbers and identifying who was, you know, who got first pick and working down the list. So you know, when the board hears that, you know, lottery, that's what it's related to. But yes, we were off to the races quickly after the marijuana ordinances were adopted. So with this particular situation, and I tried to lay this out in the staff report and just for our viewing audience, you know, this is where the separation distance between marijuana retailers and provisioning centers is normally 1,000 feet unless it's a social equity qualifying applicant, in which case that distance is cut in half to 500 feet. The circumstances surrounding the nearby marijuana retailer at 3825 Stadium Drive, which is on the south side, when this location we're talking about tonight was actively occupied by a licensed marijuana retailer, this other company was in the process of developing a retail location on the south side of Stadium Drive, which is in our natural features protection overlay. And the site that had been selected dropped off steeply towards the south and was quite heavily covered with trees. So this went before our Natural Features Protection Review Board, and there was a lot of back and forth with the planning staff trying to figure out how to work within the confines of the ordinance, because here we had this 1,000-foot separation distance pushing the development of this new building, you know, into this steep sloped area, causing removal of a lot of trees and construction of large retaining walls. So, you know, what was determined was that the NFP standards actually allow for the city to provide necessary relief to protect the natural features from setbacks and build-to zones. So a 50 feet of relief was granted to that marijuana retailer at 3825 Stadium Drive to keep the building further to the north, out of the sloped area and away from the trees. So that resulted in a established separation distance between the location we're talking about tonight and the one on the south side of Stadium Drive of 950 feet. So that's where the 950 feet comes from, just to be crystal clear, versus the normal 1,000 feet because of that natural features protection relief. So, so then looking at the request tonight, when it was determined that the applicant that had submitted the license, LE Battle Creek, Inc., to utilize the 2 tenant spaces at 4114 Stadium Drive for the new retailer. When the separation distance came into question, we circled back to them. They retained an architect to get more specific measurements on the distance between the 2 marijuana retailer sites. And that's how it was determined that really the deficiency was was 7 feet or potentially slightly less than 7 feet. But we rounded up for, to be safe on this one. But so really, it's a very minimal request that's before the board tonight. There was no administrative relief that the city staff could exercise to address this nominal distance situation, because it is a required separation between marijuana retailers. It had to then go before the Zoning Board of Appeals this evening, to have you hear the case and render a decision. So, with that being said, the applicant has provided a floor plan showing how they plan to utilize the space. As you can see, that front 7 feet of the building space would barely cover the entrance vestibule and a small portion of the lobby seating area. So, there's not much, there is no like product being placed in that front of the front of the building. That would be the area that's closest to the marijuana retailer across the street. So, and I think that was also mentioned by the applicant. The other items of mention under special circumstance would be the fact that this is an existing building. So if this had been a new build, we could have pushed pause and they could have looked at ways to redesign the building or shift the whole building back, but we're working with an existing building, existing tenant spaces. One half of the building is already occupied, so, that would also limit, trying to renovate the building to address this shortfall. There had also been a previous marijuana retailer in the building, as was mentioned by Mr. Weinberg, and there's already camera placements and a lot of elements needed for a marijuana retailer that are intact and can be utilized, by his business moving in. So, as far as adverse impacts, again, this request is very nominal. It represents 0.7% of the overall separation distance of 950 feet. And there is no, even with the prior marijuana retailer, there was no difficulties identified by staff with neighboring properties. The only issue we had was with the prior marijuana retailer was really the sign out front, and the property owner has already hired a sign company to work with the city. The side note on that is there's a 5-year agreement for them to modify that non-conforming sign, and that agreement expired during COVID, and we had been working with the prior tenant, that was marijuana retailer in the building, and they only had a temporary banner up on the sign. They weren't even there long enough to get a permanent sign made, but we had hoped to get that resolved, but that's something that is now in process as well. So, as mentioned, staff is in support of this variance, as it is the minimal action that will make possible the utilization of these tenant spaces. It is a negligible amount that is not something that will be noticeable to virtually anybody looking at the two marijuana retailer locations, as one is on the north side of Stadium Drive and one is on the south. So I don't have any more comments at this time. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Are there board questions of staff?
So you're from the other, your friend who came to speak, not you. You're from the other retailer, right?
He's the landlord.
So, okay, sorry, I'm sorry. You guys, you don't have to get up. Thank you. Okay, so in terms of who would be impacted by that proximity issue has come to be in support of the applicant.
Well, he's not from the retailer across the street.
I see.
That was where the lottery comment came. So I really bought the building for the purpose of putting a dispensary or provisioning center
Sure.
in the front of that building. And we just happened to have a disagreement with the tenant up front that took a long time to find resolved.
Okay, thank you for that.
Bought for the purpose of that, and then the rezoning or the variance happened with the other operator, and that's where all of your discount happened, honestly, from a timing standpoint and
I understand.
where the breakdown was between the two properties.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you.
To further clarify on that, so you're the owner of 4114 Stadium Drive? Or that one, okay.
That's the owner of both.
And 3825?
No,
Okay,
that's a separate property.
okay,
I own 4114 Stadium Drive. The provision trailer in there, as well as the two spaces that, we're going to use to play with that property. So, good tenants there, if they wouldn't,
great, thank you.
It ain't no fun if the homies can't have none. This is great. Thank you.
Are there other questions of staff or the applicants? Very well. Will there be a finding of fact?
I move that the finding of fact shall include all information included in the notice of public hearing dated July 27th, 2022, and the agenda packet staff provided for this request at 4114 Stadium Drive. 9 notices of public hearing were sent and 0 responses were received. 1 additional item was received from the applicant, which was a letter of support from Kate Miller, Director of Career and Continuing Education at Kalamazoo Valley Community College. A public hearing was held before the board. Public comments were accepted. James Broden, owner of the building, spoke in favor. He mentioned that he won the lottery when it came to early marijuana licenses being distributed in the city and bought the property for purposes of a marijuana dispensary. In addition to all the things that I've just mentioned, the finding of facts will also include the following. It was mentioned that building improvements will take place, parking lot improvements, and it was also mentioned about the KVCC relationship. The facts presented regarding circumstances or conditions of the property or structures that are special circumstances include the special circumstance is the location of the existing commercial building. There is no feasible way to redesign the front of the building to move the front tenant unit out of the required separation distance. The business wants to occupy both front and back units of the building. The facts presented regarding the cause of special circumstances are the applicant pursued this location as it was licensed before as a marijuana provisioning center. The facts presented regarding whether the applicant is denied rights enjoyed by other parties, property owners of the same zoning district by application of the ordinance are, without this request, they would be unable to utilize the full retail space, front and back. The facts presented regarding whether the action requested is the minimum action, which will make it possible to use the lot or structure in a manner that does not negatively impact the public and meets the spirit of the ordinance are, this dimensional variance is 7 feet, which represents 0.7% of the overall separation distance of 950 feet. The facts presented regarding whether the granting of this variance will adversely affect adjacent land in a material way are it will not adversely affect adjacent land. There's no expansion of the building footprint or parking lot. The facts presented regarding whether the granting of this variance will be generally consistent with the purposes and intent of the ordinance are, the intent of the ordinance is to promote orderly development. This request will be consistent with the spirit of the ordinance. That is what I have.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Very well. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same. The finding of fact that motion has passed. Is there a motion regarding the pending application?
Yeah. I make a motion for the granting of a dimensional variance from Chapter 50, 4.4E1B of 7 feet to allow a marijuana retailer to locate 943 feet from another nearby marijuana retailer at 4114 Stadium Drive, where the established separation distance would otherwise be 950 feet.
Will there be a second?
Second.
Thank you. The board now will discuss the motion before us. Anybody have anything to say?
So I'm going to be in favor of this. To me, the key special circumstance is the fact that there was another marijuana retailer in this space already. While it may have been in the back of the building, we heard the testimony that there's just an internal wall, not a firewall in there. It seems that this 7 feet distance makes really no distinction whether it's at the front or the back of the building. I'm also persuaded by the reasoning in the staff memo and the fact that the city is recommending this. I also think that it seems to me the city has already used some good common sense around making some accommodation to protect the trees and the slopes as provided in natural features protection overlay. And so adding this additional 7 feet just seems like another common sense accommodation.
Anybody else? Very well. Mr. Eldridge, can I get a roll call vote?
We'll start with Harrington,
Yes.
Purdue,
Yes.
Turpinning,
Yes.
Lager,
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes. The request has been approved. Thank you.
For tonight.
Yeah. Are there any other agenda items tonight?
There are no other agenda items for tonight.
I'll adjourn the meeting at 8:08. Thank you.
I like 2 cases more than 4.
Oh, listen to that. Laying down the law. Give him manpower. Look what he